We have a good matchup in the NFC North. The Detroit Lions are going up against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. The Detroit Lions are coming off a very convincing win against the Commanders, whereas the Vikings are in the opposite realm, coming off of an embarrassing loss on Monday Night Football to the Eagles. But nevertheless, both teams are looking to take a lead in this division, and both teams are, to me, in opposite places to where I thought they would have been. I thought the Vikings would have played a lot better last week, and I thought the Lions would probably be 0-2 at this point. But here we are. The Lions have basically scored 60 some odd points in the last couple of weeks. So, Kyle, I'm looking to you and I'm asking, who do you think is going to win this tough division battle and why?
I think I'm going with the Lions here on this one. This honestly might be the first time where we've ever done a game analysis where we're talking about the Lions and I'm actually picking them. Because I have to say, this Lions offense is no joke. Like you said, Kev, they've put up over 30 points in every game that they played so far. Granted, they lost week 1 to the Eagles, but they made a resounding comeback in that game, and they earned my respect in that one. To get that game to a 3-point game against Philly in week 1, I thought that was something of remembrance for me. And then last week against the Commanders, they continued that success that they had against the Eagles with their offense. And I thought that Jared Goff was outstanding last week. Jared Goff had 4 touchdowns last week. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, I hope I got his first name right, looked like an absolute beast. And there's a very good chance that he could continue that success going into this matchup. It's just overall, I like where Detroit is at. And I don't know if they're just kind of using Hard Knocks as an excuse to maybe overachieve a little bit here. But I was talking about them the other day. They're able to move the ball effectively with Jared Goff passing the ball. DeAndre Swift has looked solid so far. And by and large, their defense is able to force turnovers. They're able to get the ball back for their offense, and Jared Goff and that offense are able to capitalize on it. Now, by and large, when I look at Minnesota, Minnesota's coming off probably the worst game that they'll play for at least the next couple of weeks. Kirk Cousins looked awful against the Eagles on Monday Night Football. I'm of the mindset that Kirk Cousins should never play another primetime again in his career with that performance. There's a very good chance that he got away with probably 2 or 3 picks that he had on top of what he had at the end of that game, just because he had 3 interceptions, if I remember correctly, against the Eagles. More than likely, it should have been like 5 or 6, just because of some of the errant passes that he threw. And to be quite honest with you, I thought their defense actually held up pretty well against Philly, but you can only hold up so long when your quarterback is basically giving the ball back to the other team. And there's a very good chance that Kirk Cousins could fall back into that same trap based on what Detroit's defense could do. The one thing that I would have to focus on Detroit, though, is they will have to slow down Kirk because, let's face it, when it comes to the Lions defense, that is their Achilles heel. This Lions defense has been giving up points left and right. They gave up over 25 last week to the Commanders. They almost gave up 40 to the Eagles in week 1. And there's a very good chance, as long as Kirk Cousins doesn't turn the ball over like he did against the Eagles, that the Vikings could put up 30-plus points. When you have playmakers like Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, and also just throwing Irv Smith there for extra credit. And Dalvin Cook, just because Dalvin Cook is on my fantasy team, and hopefully he does a little bit better for me going into this week. Overall, though, this is going to be a very competitive matchup. I think this is actually going to be a high-scoring affair because both defenses, let's just say it, suck. And I do think that points are going to be pretty easy to come by here. But I'm going to go with the Lions on this one. They've shown me enough throughout the first 2 weeks of the year to have some confidence in them moving forward. I don't know what's going to happen for them for the rest of the year. But right now, I'm going to say the Lions win this one in a close one. I'm going to say that the Lions win this one by the score of 34-30. I think Jared Goff does enough against that Vikings defense. And I think, by and large, I think DeAndre Swift and Amon-Ra St. Brown are going to have solid days like they had last week. And I just think that their offensive capability, their offensive firepower, I think it's going to reign supreme in this one when it's all said and done.
I couldn't agree more. I definitely saw this matchup immediately and said the same thing. I think the Lions are definitely going to have the upset. I think it's going to be a shootout, just like you said. Both defenses are subpar, but I do think that Minnesota's going to make it a little bit closer than we both are anticipating, just because Kirk is going to be pissed at the performance that he had in Philly. Justin Jefferson is going to be pissed that he got locked up by Darius Slay. Dalvin Cook is going to be pissed because he only had about 17 to 20 yards rushing last week against Philadelphia. So you're looking at it and you're saying the proficient leaders of this team offensively struggled, and they didn't just struggle. They were shut down effectively almost throughout the entire game. Kirk Cousins was the leader there because he had 3 interceptions, but that offensive line was also in question because I believe that the pass rush was able to really get to Kirk towards the latter half of that game. Now, what Detroit does have is a gem in the rough, a diamond in the rough. Hutchinson, that boy from Michigan, he is no joke. Bro, 3 sacks already in 2 games. That man is bullying offensive linemen, and I think that that is going to continue, and I think he's going to get to Kirk Cousins another sack and a half, if not 2 sacks. I'm going to be bold and say maybe even 3, because that is how dominant he is playing thus far. We all know that the offense, led by Jared Goff, has been proficient, and we all know that that defense isn't necessarily something to be scared of outside of what I just mentioned with Hutchinson. But Dan Campbell and those boys are out there and they're grinding. They're being tough, they're being gritty, and they're being competitive. 30-point games in each of the first 2 says a lot to me because everybody wrote off the Lions for the most part at the beginning of the year. Hard knocks aside, I agree with Dan Campbell. I think this team could potentially even sneak into the playoffs because I think that they have probably one of the best offensive lines in the game. So I will go out and say on a limb, the Lions may win this a little bit more convincingly, but I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota comes out and puts up 30 as well. So I'm going to agree with Kyle. It's going to be in the upper 30s, but I'm going to go with maybe 38 to 30, 38 to 35, something of that magnitude, because I don't know, man. I know I'm basically contradicting myself in this entire segment because I said that the Lions would win convincingly, but I think that Minnesota is going to make it competitive as well. It really depends on who's going to get the first stop, who's going to create the first turnover, what offense is going to be stopped. And it's going to be really tough, man, because you got the Vikings coming off of a horrible game on Monday, and you got the Lions building a lot of confidence in the last couple of games. So who's going to be able to ride that wave high? Who's going to force that first turnover, man? And what coaching staff is going to be able to outcoach the other?